Have you ever felt completely surrounded, like the problems in your life are just too big to handle? Maybe it's financial stress, health challenges, relationship struggles, or even fear of the unknown. In those moments, it's easy to feel overwhelmed, powerless, and trapped. But what if I told you that what you see isn't the full story? What if, right now, there's a reality beyond what your eyes can perceive? A reality where God is actively protecting, guiding, and fighting for you. Today, I want to share an incredible story from 2 Kings 6 verses 15 to 17 that reveals just how powerful and present God is, even when it seems like everything is against you. This story takes us to the ancient city of Dothan, where the prophet Elisha and his servant find themselves in a life-threatening situation. Picture this: it's early in the morning, and Elisha's servant wakes up and steps outside. As he looks around, his heart sinks. Surrounding the entire city is a massive army of horses and chariots, an army sent by the king of Aram to capture one man, Elisha. The servant sees no way out. The enemy is everywhere. Panicked, he runs to Elisha and cries, "Oh no, my lord! What shall we do?" Can you imagine how he must have felt? The odds were impossible. He was terrified because all he could see was the threat. And isn't that how we often feel when we face overwhelming challenges? We see the bills piling up, the diagnosis, the conflict, the uncertainty, and it feels like there's no way out. But Elisha responds in a way that is completely unexpected. He says, "Don't be afraid. Those who are with us are more than those who are with them." Let that sink in for a moment. Can you imagine the servant's confusion? He's looking at the enemy army, and he must be thinking, "What are you talking about, Elisha? There's no one with us. It's just the two of us against an entire army." Elisha doesn't argue or try to explain himself. Instead, he does something remarkable. He prays. He says, "Open his eyes, Lord, so that he may see." And at that moment, something extraordinary happens. The Lord opens the servant's spiritual eyes, and he sees a reality he couldn't see before. Surrounding them on the hills are horses and chariots of fire, God's heavenly army, far greater and more powerful than the enemy below. This story is so powerful because it shifts our perspective from the visible to the invisible, from the natural to the supernatural. It reminds us that there is so much more happening than what we can see with our physical eyes. God's protection, presence, and power are real, even when they're invisible to us. Let's break this down and see how this story applies to our lives today. First, let's talk about fear. The servant's reaction to the army is completely understandable. When we're faced with something overwhelming, our instinct is often to panic. We focus on the problem, and the more we focus on it, the bigger and scarier it seems. The servant could only see the enemy surrounding the city, and in his eyes, that was all there was. But Elisha had a different perspective. He wasn't afraid because he knew a truth the servant couldn't see, that God's power far outweighed the power of the enemy. This brings us to our first lesson. When fear grips us, we need to shift our focus from the problem to God. Fear thrives when we focus on what's visible. Faith grows when we trust in what's unseen. Next, let's talk about spiritual vision. Elisha didn't try to convince his servant through words. He prayed for God to open his eyes. And this is so important because spiritual vision isn't something we achieve on our own, it's something God gives us. Elisha's prayer teaches us that when we feel blind to God's presence, the first thing we should do is pray. So often, we only see the surface of our circumstances. We see the bills, the arguments, the sickness, but we don't see the bigger picture of what God is doing behind the scenes. Spiritual vision allows us to see life from God's perspective. It reminds us that we're not alone, that God is with us, and that He's actively working on our behalf. Finally, let's talk about God's protection. The chariots of fire surrounding Elisha and his servant are a vivid reminder of God's power and presence. These heavenly armies weren't just symbolic, they were real. They were there to protect Elisha because God had a purpose for his life that no enemy could thwart. And the same is true for us today. God's protection is real, even if we can't see it. Psalm 34 verse 7 says, The angel of the Lord encamps around those who fear him, and he delivers them. This doesn't mean we won't face challenges or hardships, but it does mean that God is with us through it all, fighting for us, surrounding us with his love and power. So, what can we learn from this story? When life feels overwhelming, remember that what you see isn't the full picture. Like Elisha's servant, we need to pray for spiritual eyes to be opened so that we can see God's presence and power at work in our lives. When fear tries to take over, shift your focus to God. Remind yourself that those who are with us are more than those who are with them. And trust in God's protection. The same God who sent chariots of fire to surround Elisha is the same God who surrounds you today. His power hasn't changed. His love for you hasn't diminished. Take a moment to reflect. What are the challenges in your life that feel like they're surrounding you? Where do you need to ask God to open your eyes and help you see his hand at work? This story is an invitation to trust God in the unseen, to walk by faith and not by sight, and to rest in the assurance that no matter what you face, God is with you. So today pray, Lord, open my eyes, and trust that he will.